Hello and welcome to Heilman Haver, the Stage and Screen podcast, coming to you from Casa de Quinn and 1111 Studios in beautiful Port Orchard, Washington. I'm Matt Haver.
And I'm Greg Heilman. We're two local actors looking to hone our craft by exploring the best in local theater and on the big screen. Each week we bring you entertainment news and views, celebrate classic Hollywood, enjoy cocktails with a Tinseltown twist, interview talented local actors and directors, and chat with industry experts from LA to the UK.
And speaking of the City of Angels, joining us for episode 57 is well-known Los Angeles cardiologist and actor Dr. Rico Simonini. Rico originated the role of Frank Sinatra in Willard Manus' play Frank and Ava in 2014 and again in the 2018 film by the same name, which he adapted and co-produced. Today's interview took place on January 25th, the 32nd anniversary of Ava Gardner's death, and in a few moments we'll hear from Rico about his film and the woman who saved Sinatra by first destroying him. Coming up right after a look at the arts around the sound.
And lots happening on the stage this week. Hitting the Western Washington Center for the Arts stage, it's the final weekend of Love or Marriage, a collection of one-act plays by George Bernard Shaw, directed by our friend Kristi Ann Jacobson, and starring a cast of local favorites. You can find my review of the show on our Facebook page and catch Love or Marriage tonight, Friday, January 28th through Sunday, January 30th. Get tickets and more info at WWCA.us.
And over in Bremerton, you can catch CSTOCK's presentation of Roald Dahl's Matilda, the musical, also in its final weekend. Greg's review of the show is also up on our Facebook page, and tickets are available at cstock.org. And don't forget to mark your calendars now for Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, opening at Bremerton Community Theater next Friday, February 4th. Info and tickets can be had at bctshows.org, and everything's linked in our show notes.
Well, when it comes to community theater performers, it's pretty common for actors to have day jobs. But today we're joined by a gentleman who has not only made an impact as a professional performer on stage and screen, but spends his days literally keeping the heart of LA healthy.
Dr. Rico Simonini is a leading Los Angeles cardiologist, an accomplished actor, writer, and producer. As an actor, Rico has enjoyed the opportunity to play leading roles in dozens of plays on stages in New York, Los Angeles, and a few places in between, working the boards as Ricky Roma in Glengarry Glen Ross, R.P. McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Daniel Caffey, A Few Good Men, and Joe Pendleton in Heaven Can Wait, in addition to originating over a dozen roles in dramas by local playwrights, all while maintaining his cardiology practice.
Like Anton Chekhov, Somerset Maugham, and Arthur Conan Doyle before him, Rico remained married to medicine while pursuing his paramour, the theater. And after being recruited by one of Los Angeles' most prestigious medical centers, he found himself being recruited by his clients to indulge his fancy for film and theater.
This led Rico to study the craft with various mentors, including the Baron Brown Meisner Studios as well as the Actors Studio. In 2014, playwright Willard Manus chose Rico to originate the role of Frank Sinatra in Frank and Ava, a two-person play developed at the Actors Studio and based on true events, portraying the star's iconic and tumultuous romance.
Inspired by the story of Sinatra's redemption and resurrection despite improbable odds, Rico undertook the screenplay adaptation, and his first feature film, Frank and Ava, premiered in 2018 with a global release in early 2019. Rico joins us from his office in Beverly Hills. Welcome to the show, Rico.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Rico, 32 years ago today's January 25th, we lost Ava Gardner at age 67. We'd like to find out, why was it so important to you to tell this specific story in Frank and Ava about Frank Sinatra and, as we mentioned in our intro, the woman who saved him, as your movie promo says, by breaking him?
Well, I think it's one of the greatest romance stories of all time, let alone just Hollywood romance stories. Because, people know about Frank Sinatra, they know about Ava Gardner, but the question is, these are two people that their romance was at critical moments of both their lives and both their careers. And everyone knows Frank is the iconic chairman of the board, but I'm talking about, this is Frank before he was chairman of anything. Frank was basically this skinny crooner that sat there and sang, and these women swooned in the front row, and he was doing that through the 1940s. But then by the end of the 40s, people kind of got fed up with Frank and the bad boy mentality and the dalliances and the affairs with this one and the other one. And this was, late 1940s, early 1950s. America was pretty conservative, and there was a very ultra right wing editing mechanism out there, not unlike today, right? Anyway, but and Frank was being canceled basically. They were looking at everything he was doing and saying, hey, your friends are gangsters, or you talk with liberals and communists, and you defend minorities and all that. And this is not what fits in the WASP America view, right? And so that and his organized crime ties and all that, and the fact that he was losing his voice. He had suffered from a vocal cord hemorrhage and was losing his voice. And they were kind of getting ready to get rid of this guy. And he was being banished to something called television, because at the time, television was like public radio. Like people go there and they go away. Here's
a fate worse than death.
Exactly. So, and he meets Ava Gardner, who came from very modest background, a small little town in North Carolina, Gradtown, North Carolina, and accidentally became a star. Basically, her sister showed some pictures, and she was discovered and became this overnight sensation. And dated Mickey Rooney, married Mickey Rooney, and Artie Shaw, who was Mickey Rooney was the greatest star at that time. He was the big star, and Artie Shaw was the big band leader. And when she met Frank Sinatra, she was dating Howard Hughes, the richest, most powerful man in the world. It probably had her house bugged for everything to make sure what she would do. And she was one of those women that should be celebrated, because she was one of those women that took her own power, and because there's always was the stories of the Hollywood casting couch and all that, and Ava kind of flipped that. Ava used her ability and her power and maybe even her sexuality to kind of like keep people in line and get gigs she wanted to get, and get people to listen to her and own that. There was a lot of very strong women in Hollywood back then, like the Barbara Stanwicks, Betty Davis, who basically, they didn't take crap from anybody, and they basically told the studio heads, hey, this is what I'm doing. If you don't like it, fire me or whatever. And if you fire me, I'll go work with somebody else and make you look bad. And these guys did what they wanted to do. So she was a very powerful, strong woman, incredibly beautiful, and in every way, conventional and non-conventional. Because everyone says she was like she cussed like one of the boys, right? She hung out, and everyone liked being around her. And here's Frank, who basically had, you say, kind of had his way with people before her, right? He had all these women on the side and these affairs, and then he meets the one person that he can't conquer, and she basically had his number. I mean, she was way younger than him, but she basically had him, right where she wanted him, and he had to have her. But here he was trying to get her attention or try to win her, and his career was dying. He was being pushed out of Hollywood, and he's trying to compete with Howard Hughes, who could buy her anything she wants, take her anywhere she wants, and here he is, barely having enough money to support the wife and the kids, and all he really had was the profession of his love. And it was really an amazing relationship, because he needed her. There's something about her that's like every guy meets that one person, or every person meets that one person that has their number that they're going to die for. I always say, there's a person all of our lives that'll make us stand on the roof on the top deck of the Eiffel Tower at midnight, looking over the edge and saying, it's not worth it anymore, because he or she is gone, and you have these feelings, and that was her. She was that person for him. She pulled at him like nobody else did. And I think what happened to Frank as a result of being with her is that she humbled him, because he had gotten everything he wanted. He kind of was this kind of bad boy, I guess. I don't want to say the Justin Bieber of his time, because a little more, I think him a lot better than Justin Bieber, but to give the millennial generation an idea, an example, he was that guy, did whatever he wanted, and people kind of like went with him. And suddenly all that kind of stopped. And here's this woman that he can't have. And he had to grow up. He had to actually feel what it's like to want something and not get it, and want something so bad that you can't live without it. And she was one of those things. And being an actor, being a serious actor, and getting the role From Here to Eternity was the other one of those things. So the movie basically deals with those two wants. He wanted to play Maggio and From Here to Eternity, because he knew it would change his life and turn him around. And he wanted Ava Gardner. He wanted to have her. And for some way, both pursuits weren't exactly compatible with each other. Let's put it that way. And that's why it was such a unique relationship, because she basically was the one that made him grow up. If you listen to Nancy Sinatra talk about Frank, about the songs he recorded after Ava, there was definitely that palpable gravitas and heartache in those songs, like those Nelson Riddle songs that came in the late 50s.
Longing.
The Longing, and that was Ava did that. And the same thing with his performances. If you see him playing Maggio, or you see him in Man with the Golden Arm, the great film he did that he didn't win for. Probably should have won for that. You see, there's this vulnerable guy. He wasn't just playing, hey, I'm this dancer guy, I get the girl. No, he's a guy who was broken. And I think she helped him get there by basically grounding him. I mean, everybody needs to be kind of brought down, and that's what she kind of did for him. She kind of brought him down to reality, made him kind of, right, by having him not just be able to conquer her, and that kind of, like I said, her breaking his heart, her bringing him down like that, it kind of humbled him, and suddenly he had this place to come from, of a real sincere wanting and longing and pain. And that pain stayed with him for probably up until she died, because Ava was subject verboten around him. You can never talk about her around him, because that was the one person that really hurt. And she always tugged at his heartstrings. Even later on, when they weren't together anymore. Ava had some problems with George C. Scott and other people that she had dated. Really terrible experiences. And Frank, was ready to go in there and dig a ditch and stick somebody in there, if even harming or talking inappropriately to Ava. So yeah.
It sounds like you're describing a muse, that she was his muse, and then all of a sudden that part of his life is gone, and it's just an empty place.
Yeah, I would definitely say that she definitely it's like we all, I don't know if you believe in this kind of stuff, but there's frequencies. We all have that person that kind of vibrates at that frequency with us, and we kind of they touch something, and they connect something, or they resonate something, or they evoke something that other people don't do. And then suddenly, when that person's gone, it's like an itch you can't scratch anymore, or a hunger that never gets fed, and that's kind of what happened. And I think all of us, in life, it's great to live. It'd be great to live this Disney life where everything happens and things happy at the end. But life isn't like that. Life is about disappointment and heartbreak and things that don't work out. And in fact, it's the failures and disappointments that really make us more than the successes. And Ava was that love, and she was that special woman. And probably they were probably more alike than they wanted to admit, because she didn't want to be conquered or owned by him, and she even says that in her biographies, that she wasn't going to let him own her. But he always held that special part in her heart.
Well, it can't have been easy playing someone of that stature, one of the most well-known entertainers in history, and then equally on the other side, playing a woman who's been described as the world's most beautiful animal. Now, you were involved in the process to bring the stage show to the screen extensively, and including the casting. What led to Emily Alicia Lowe in the role of Ava?
Well, I tell you, it was a tough search, trying to find that combination of toughness, vulnerability, and then that just beauty that you have to emanate that quality of just looking at her. It kind of changes the room. There's some people, when they walk into a room, they change it. Ava was like that. So trying to find someone that had that quality. Yeah, it was a search. We had Megan Foley and was my casting director, and she and Chuck Mara, her partner, husband, casting director, and they basically brought in all these girls, and we were reading them, and we had the play that had been done about a year and a half prior. So we had a sense from the play what we needed to get in for the film. And it was tough. And the ironic part is there's a movie I like, not too many people know about it. Well, maybe they do. Fabulous Baker Boys. Remember that movie, Fabulous Baker Boys?
Yeah.
And they're reading and they're auditioning all these singers, right? And then at the very end, this girl comes stumbling down the stairs, breaks her heel, and God damn it, go, who are you? What? You're late. And then she winds up being the person. So basically, Emily missed the first round of auditions because she had some kind of conflict. Then she shows up. I said, well, then come to the callbacks. I mean, I was trying to be, and she walked in and she was like, wow, really? And so it was like she was that person that kind of came in in an unconventional time, an unconventional way. And we just kind of read her because there was something about her that made us think that she would have it. And she's from the South, and she's got that kind of quality, and you see on the screen, what the energy she gives off. So that was, that's what went into that. Yeah.
Well, the period of time you guys focus on in the film may not be real well known to most fans of either Frank or Ava, and was certainly, like you describe, a challenging time for both of them. What kind of research went into preparing for the roles? And did you work with the families of either star? And if so, was there any pushback from them for showing their loved ones in all their, we'll call it, tumultuous glory?
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a great question. So, the original concept was from a stage play that was developed at the Actors Studio that Willard Manus had written.
Mm-hmm.
And Will, basically, I had done a play with him before. Story was he had this play about the Berlin Wall, about how the Soviets built it overnight and totally outfoxed the CIA by giving him bad information. It's a really great play, actually. Make a great film if you had $100 million. And he was trying to replace the lead of his play, who had to speak Greek, Russian, and English. Obviously, he was supposed to be an agent, a double agent, and he wasn't getting along, I guess, with the actor. There's a problem with the actor, and he talks to a guy named Tommy Castronova, who was one of my patients / director, member of the Actors Studio, who directed me in a bunch of shows. And he said, I want to replace this guy, but we open in 3 weeks, and who am I going to hire? It's going to be to learn all this dialogue plus 2 languages. And Tommy's like, yeah, hire my doctor. He goes, your doctor? He goes, yeah, he's an actor. He learned that stuff overnight. And so I came in to read, and I wound up getting the part, and I played Kostas the Greek, who could speak Russian and Greek, and I had the dialogue and all that. And he was so overwhelmed with the job I did there. He said, I'm going to write something for you, and I want you to play this. And it was a 1-act play that we read for the studio called Frank and Ava, and we did a reading at the studio, and it was basically 10 scenes between the two of them, spanning that period of time from 1949 to ending when he wins the Oscar. And I remember at the initial reading at the studio, you had people, members of the studio sitting there, and you had people raising their hands. What kind of play is this? They're just drinking and smoking and screwing. Who wants to listen to that? And then Marty Landau goes, obviously you don't like the same plays we do. And then, and the play was born, and it became a big hit. And so the play became like the initial seed. And then I basically did all the research by reading bios, reading articles. And through my practice, I have a lot of patients who actually worked with Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
If you look at the end of the movie, and this may be a B-reel sometime or a subsequent release, I interview a lot of people who knew Frank Sinatra, people who were patients of mine, friends of mine. Like Shirley Jones gave this great interview about how Frank quit The Music Man. He was supposed to play opposite her in The Music Man, and they had spent months and months doing all the dance sequences, music sequences, and then they're going to go back and shoot the actual acting, right? And the day they were supposed to do principal photography, the acting, Frank rolls up 6 hours late, looks at these cameras and said, what are these 2 cameras doing here? And they go, well, Frank, this is the regular camera, and this is this thing called CinemaScope, this new thing we're using. We do one-way CinemaScope, one way the other way. And Frank's like, I got paid to do 1 movie, not 2. And he gets the car, drives away, and quits. And they're saying, and she's like, how can you just quit the movie after we spent all this time recording and all that? How in the world could this happen? And she finds out that what really happened was that Ava was in Africa doing Magambo, and Clark Gable was there. And there was this rumors of this bullfighter that was taking side trips, that she was taking side trips to Spain. And Frank was on the phone with Ava. If you imagine your worst cell phone service now, imagine being on the phone from LA to Africa in 1952 or 1951, whatever that was, and having, and through the bad, watery, staticky connection, you have a fight with somebody, and they say, well, I guess I'll just have to amuse myself here, or you have fun with Shirley Jones, and click, hang up, and not call you back. So Frank quit the show, got on the plane, went to Africa, and sat on set to make sure that Ava wouldn't stray, because he was so afraid of losing her while she was away. That's why he quit that show. So stories like that from people that knew him, people who dated him, people who lived with him, actors who auditioned for the part of Maggio and had met Frank. So a lot of information came from that. And as far as the family, we did reach out, and it wasn't exact. It was not the best response, and the play wasn't appreciated by the family. The feedback I got was Ava's too sympathetic. She was a homewrecker. Well, I mean, they're going to say that because that's what it was for them, right? And then basically the best we got was we wish you luck with the project, but we're not going to contribute any music or anything like that. And that's kind of where it was, because they actually, the accuracy was pretty good. Because we kept everything was pretty factual, based on, true stories and articles and bios and all that. I made a point to really keep that real, because there was enough drama and reality to have to, like, it really didn't have to, create anything that didn't truly exist. And some of the stories, I remember the feedback I got was, who told you about that? How'd you know about that? And I said, well, because so-and-so was there, and he saw the whole thing. And like, actually one guy, Bob Christopher, he's in there. He's in the interviews at the end. He was 93 when he gave this interview, and he auditioned for Maggio, didn't get it, was told Eli Wallach was doing it, and then find out suddenly that Eli didn't get it because the agent wanted too much money. And then suddenly he's doing Barefoot Contessa in Spain with Ava, and he meets Ava Gardner first day of rehearsals, and she walks in. He says she walks in with this beautiful, like, kind of lavender scent and this hair, and she's wearing like this robe, and she thought I was the makeup person, because she drops down the robes. Okay, just work on the hair. And I was like, oh, excuse me, no, I'm an actor. I'm doing the movie. All nervous, because here she is, like, in her glory. I'm like, and she goes, oh, really? And she takes her, so let's read lines. And then they start reading lines together. And then the next day, Bogey shows up, and he's there for his usual daily session of run lines with Ava. He goes, hey, who are you? I'm here to run lines with Ava. No, that's Frank's girl. You get out of here. Scram, beat it. And Bogey kicked him out. And then the bullfighter was there. And one time Frank showed up in Spain, and Bob had to run interference because Ava was gone off at the bullfighter somewhere in town, and they had to come up with some alibis. Oh, no, they're doing pickup shots over on this beach, and you can't get there because the road's washed out. And we had, so all these great stories that never made it into the film because of well, there's a whole nother story about that. But yeah, but we have all these terrific stories that were done. And one of my patients actually lived with Frank in Palm Springs. So she had all these great stories of what it was like to be Frank's girlfriend for 4 months. And so I got a lot of like firsthand accounts of Frank. And then I met Frank as a kid with my dad. So Frank, my dad hung out with that world of New York knock-around Italian guys with a nightclub restaurant business. So I kind of knew the world of that. So when I wrote it from that perspective, and I wrote it from that, and I figured out the inspirations for the performances. I basically used that as my research, because basically my dad was like a Sinatra guy. He was like a tough New York guy with blue eyes, Italian, hung out with mob guys. He just didn't sing. They did everything else. He chased women. He hung out. He's very happy-go-lucky. Very he man of his word. He loved his friends and was very loyal. Very, like I said, very Frank-like. And he knew, and Frank knew him, and he was one of Frank's favorite waiters in Manhattan. So every time they came to New York, he would eat at one of my father's restaurants wherever he was working. So that was like part of it. So yeah, so I kind of had that background and the play and all the research.
Did any of those stories that you unearthed in trying to make the film change the way you played Frank, or did you have that fully formed almost coming from doing the stage play?
No, the stories and the research and because I adapted the screenplay. So as as you're writing it and adapting it, it comes more alive, and you start learning more about the man. You learn more about about mood swings and vulnerability and what meant to him. Also, what people really were after him, because he had a lot of daggers in his back. A lot of guys out there wanted to see him fail, and there were a lot of people trying to trip him up. So he kind of saw that. And also the other thing I got to learn about was his relationship with Montgomery Clift. I mean, they were very tight. Monty Clift basically taught him all about acting. They said Monty was an actor studio member. He was a legit trained actor, and Frank, really connected with Monty, and they were very close. fact, he stayed close, through Monty's career. And unfortunately, Montgomery Clift had issues with alcoholism. Eventually, died, quite young. But that kind of showed me a vulnerability about him, and how he was really, you just showed he was loyal, and what was important to him. So you kind of learned more about the depths that he would go to, and you saw the heights, and you also saw, it's like, it's funny, like when there's a lot of favorite scenes, but one favorite scenes, the one with Monty Clift in Hawaii, where they're sitting there and they're drunk, and he's trying to get over Ava, and Monty's trying to encourage him and saying, listen, use this pain in your acting. But the other scene is actually near the end of the film, is when Frank had won the Oscar, and he's drunk alone in the streets of Beverly Hills. And basically a cop wants to arrest him for vagrancy. There's some guy in a tuxedo who's drunk on somebody's lawn, carrying this little gold statue. He goes, oh, he probably stole this. Who's this guy? Probably broke into somebody's house and stole it. Then the cop's sergeant came up and said, you knucklehead, that's Frank Sinatra. But even in victory, it was alone. So there was an emptiness there. So that's kind of, you kind of almost, the stars weren't always, even when they lined up, they kind of wasn't quite lined up. There was still like a pullback, it still couldn't quite, never quite, win, you kind of won, but not quite, and there was something about that, about some of us, is like a zeitgeist of how we, this is our lot. This is the cards we have. This is what we can do with them. And then when you come to accept that, you almost find humor in it. It's like, oh, of course I'm going to be alone and not win the Oscar. Of course Ava's not going to be here. But you hope that's not the case, but of course. And I think that's kind of what led to Frank, eventually forming his own record label, and he became kind of a almost like a mafia don, the way he ran things. Why? Because coming up, everybody didn't really look out for him, and he had to kind of find it on his own. So then when he finally made it on his own, he was very loyal to people who were loyal to him, and wanted nothing to do with the people who had tried to take advantage of him, were very cautious about who tried to get close to him, because, he had learned the hard way, of the entertainment business.
Well, one of the highlights of the film is the great supporting cast.
Yeah.
Harry Dean Stanton, Eric Roberts, Katherine Hellman, Dionne Warwick, Shirley Jones, whom you mentioned before. So tell us a little bit about assembling that cast. I mean, many of whom, obviously, as you said, knew Frank.
Yeah, well, I tell you, this is one of those things that was meant to be. So a lot of my cast came from either my practice, because my practice is a lot of Hollywood types, or friends of people in my practice, and then, I mean, Harry Dean was, I've known Harry. I knew Harry Dean the last 15 years of his life, and I met him at De Niro's restaurant, which is here in West Hollywood. That became like a hangout, and suddenly people say, "Where do you find your patients from?" I go, "Well, I hang out in Robert De Niro's restaurant." They go, "You're the Italian guy who's a doctor." Good. And everybody sits down with me and tells me their problems. And Harry Dean became a friend, and he was very supportive of my acting. In fact, I did a lot of theater out here in LA, and Harry would sit there in the back and watch every show I did. And a couple of times, I remember I did Cuckoo's Nest, and I played McMurphy, and he brought Jack with him, and they both sat in the back with baseball caps, and the fans, oh my God, Nicholson's here. And so Harry always was supportive. And everyone else that you mentioned, there were people who were patients or friends. And at some point, people heard I was doing this film, and I run into somebody at the gym, goes, "Hey, are you doing this movie about Sinatra?" I go, "Yeah." "So what part am I playing?" I said, "Well, I can't really afford you." He goes, "Who said it about money? I want to be in this movie." And suddenly it was great. I'd be writing roles with people who had come up to me who said they wanted to work in the film, and it makes it much more easy to write when you know who you're writing it for. And somehow a couple of situations was kind of almost this weird synchronicity. I wrote this scene between two characters, two actors I know. And in this scene, they're supposed to hate each other. There's supposed to be this antagonism between them. And then in true life, they do hate each other, don't like each other, don't trust each other, because they both called me up and says, "Hey, I heard you doing this scene with so-and-so. Well, listen, I got to get the last close-up, otherwise he'll steal it from me." And I'm like, and so both of them, I'm like, oh my God. And you start learning these other aspects of acting, not just, knowing your lines, being on mark, being in character and flying the light, but making sure you own the scene, because there's things that people do to try to take away from you with little gimmicks, right? And so that's how well I was in casting, and trying to find something inside the person I cast that fit with the role they were playing. Even though physically they might look like the real character, but they actually, the spine was there. So it was great. I mean, just having people ask, to be in the movie. And it made it a little tough with the editing, because, some of the scenes were like so great with all these guys, and you're saying, wow, how do you cut this down? Or how do you cut this out? Because this guy did this for free and he was great. And there's a great scene where all the Italian guys are sitting around the table talking baseball. Then Frank walks in. That was inspired by the we call it the Italian hour, this lunch every Monday, where all those same guys in that scene would sit around this restaurant in West Hollywood, and they sit and we have food, and they all talk about acting. And I said, this has to be in the movie. So basically, they're all in this. I wrote a scene for all of them where that's what would happen when a bunch of Italians sit down and they start kibitzing one another, and the phrase is breaking each other's balls back and forth. And then Frank will walk in on that. That's what happens. And it was perfect. That scene was like, it looks like improv. It was all scripted, but they all worked with it. That's what they do naturally. So and someone said, this scene doesn't really drive the movie anywhere. I go, yeah, but it's a fun scene. You got these guys talking around, these old guys, and they're talking about the Dodgers and coffee and this and that. I mean, so that was the hard part. How can you cut this? How can you cut anybody's scene out when they worked for basically nothing, for like food and gas money, and here they are in the movie doing such a great natural job.
Was there a 4-hour director's cut available that you with all this stuff?
You know what? I'm working on that. It's funny. So initially, the idea I had, the inspiration I had, and how this film was supposed to look, and one of my favorite movies, I'd say, of all time, or at least top 3, is Reds, Warren Beatty, directed by. And really, think about Reds. Reds is about a romance, but it's a romance between two extraordinary people at extraordinary time in history. Okay, the revolution and socialism and all that. But it's really a love story. I mean, yeah, sure. It's like it's the Russian Revolution. It's J. Mitchell Palmer finding communism and trying to arrest Americans and all that. It's about fear, but it's really about love. These two people can't stay together because they're so strong-minded. And so I thought Frank and Ava was like that kind of a story. And what made that movie work for me, how Warren did it, Warren found these witnesses that knew them. And at the beginning of the movie, you see these really shriveled old people says, they said he was a communist, but I didn't know he was a good-looking guy. That's all I know. And as the movie went on, they would talk more about it. They even had Henry Miller, one of my favorite writers of all time, talking about, well, back then there was just as much, fucking going on as there is now, except it meant something back then. It was different, but it was still sex. I mean, and had these people just speak about that era and those people. That was my idea that's why I interviewed all these witnesses that tell me these great stories about Frank, and that version never got cut because it would have been 3 hours long, and it was like, well, yeah, Warren Beatty can make a 3-hour and 20-minute movie, but and they'll watch it, but it's not going to work. They'll say, who's this guy? So yeah,
we still want to see it.
Okay, well, I can work on that.
So you've made a film about your hero. You've got a full-time, successful cardiology practice. You're also chief medical officer or advisor for the community organized relief effort. We could get you on for a whole nother episode about how you juggle all those things. But what we really want to know is what's next for you? What do you have in the hopper as far as acting goes? And how can we and all of our listeners keep up with the latest for you?
Sure. What's next? It depends what COVID has in mind for us. It's been challenging as far as getting gigs and figuring out what's going on. I just got back from Greece, where I did a movie called The Greek Job with Eric Roberts, Kostas Mandalor, and the lead's a guy named Anthimos, who's a Greek celebrity. I think he did Dancing with the Stars, a bunch of shows there. So it's an intriguing story about Greek politics and the interaction between the church, the KGB, and East Germans And how to kind of form Greek politics in the 70s and 80s. So I did that, and then there's a movie coming out, My Dinner with Eric Roberts, and I did this, basically two guys sitting down having dinner talking about life. That's supposed to be released next week. So how can you find out about this stuff? I guess if you go to ricosimonini.com is one way, and the website will have information. Frank and Ava is on frankandavathemovie.com, or on my IMDb page, you'll have everything that's going on. Rico Simonini IMDb, you'll see what I'm working on. As far as doing another feature, like a full, my own project. It's funny. Will Manus also wrote a play about Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe called Joe and Marilyn, and that piece really was it was also very compelling. Also another tragic figure in American history and cinema. I don't think the world's ever going to be tired of Marilyn Monroe stories, because she was very misunderstood, and I think the more time goes on, the more we realize how tragic it was. And
that's another story where you have Joe DiMaggio, who is super controlling over what she did, which would be, I would be interested in seeing that one for sure.
That's exactly. And he really was pretty controlling, and but then there's some redemption in him. You'll see there's moments where he rescued her from certain situations, and as you know, or maybe not know, when she died, she was planning on remarrying him. She had the dress all picked out. It was like a green chiffon dress they were going to get married in. So they were going to get remarried, and she left him a message to the effect of, "I want to marry you. Yes, I'll learn to make lasagna with your sister. Okay, and I'm tired of Hollywood," because it had gotten dangerous for her, and not to give too much away. So it was sad. He was really hoping to marry her and take her away from all this, and then she died.
Well, we will look forward to hopefully seeing that in the future. Sounds like a perfect story for you to tell with your experience with Frank and Ava.
No, thank you. Yeah, well, hopefully this pandemic will clear up, and the powers that be do the right things to keep us all safe, and as far as guidelines, as far as keeping people wearing masks when they should be wearing masks, getting vaccinated when they should be getting vaccinated, and hopefully getting timely tests, so we don't walk around 4 days later realizing, oh gee, I just infected half of Dodger Stadium.
It's a brave new world we're living in. Well, again, thank you so much for making time for us. This has just been fascinating. Enjoyed the film, and we've got a couple copies of the DVD we're going to give away to a couple of our lucky listeners, and hope we'll be able to stay in touch and keep up on all your future projects. It's really been a pleasure, Rico. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys, and a shout out to you guys for what you're doing. I think it's important for independent filmmakers and people trying to do stuff to have a forum or platform we can kind of speak about this and give us a little spotlight, so we can kind of we don't have much to go on out here, so getting some spotlight and getting some love is always good. So love back to you guys, and love what you're doing, and thank you for having me on the show.
Appreciate that.
Well, thanks. Next time we're in LA, we'll look you up.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you, Rico.
Well, thank you to our guest, Dr. Rico Simonini. You can stream Frank and Ava on iTunes, and the film is available to stream and purchase on DVD on Amazon Prime. Visit frankandavathemovie.com for more info on the film, and keep up with Rico at ricosimonini.com.
If you enjoyed this week's show, please make sure to follow us and share the podcast with a friend or two. Tell them to find us at heilmanandhaver.com, and tune in on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora.
And you can keep up with all of our latest on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and check out special segments like Get to Know a Theater and In the Mix on YouTube. Happy New Year, and as always, thank you for supporting local theater and for joining us on Heilman and Haver.